11. Liliana Cervantes. A mother of two from Texas named Liliana Cervantes is facing a first-degree murder charge for stabbing her fiancé to death inside their apartment in Houston. Police responded to the scene one night in March 2023 and arrived to find the 25-year-old trying to stitch up 32-year-old Nathan Freeman's wounds. Freeman was pronounced dead at the scene, and Cervantes was taken into custody on suspicion of murder. Responding officers found two large, bloody kitchen knives in the sink. Nathan's mother, Tessa Freeman, told ABC 13 that the couple seemed to be doing fine just months earlier when she and her husband visited the pair for Thanksgiving. According to a probable cause statement, Cervantes said that she blacked out during the stabbing. She further claimed that she snapped back into reality by having water splashed on her, but that she blacked out again after that. After coming around for a second time, Cervantes dialed 911 and tried stitching up Freeman's wounds herself. The apartment was covered in blood when police arrived, and the medical examiner who performed the victim's autopsy found 3 stab wounds. For now, the case appears to be ongoing, so we'll have to wait and see what happens while the case works its way through the court system. 10. John Bell. When 48-year-old John Bell's car broke down one evening in 2022, he called his girlfriend to come pick him up at his home in the English town of Darlington. He brought along a case of beer and drank 15 cans of it at the woman's home. Bell also downed a significant amount of wine and drank some gin before he started accusing his girlfriend of cheating on him. He spat on the woman and called her names, and following his insults, he punched her in the face 6 times. Then he grabbed her by the neck and shoved her against a wall. The victim managed to free herself from being strangled and locked herself in another room while waiting for help to arrive. Thankfully, she received no further injuries, and Bell was arrested at the scene. He told investigators that he blacked out and couldn't remember anything that had happened. It wasn't Bell's first time getting in trouble for his temper. He had 14 convictions on his record from prior offenses, including 2 that were domestic violence related. During his trial for the most recent attack, he claimed that he acted in self-defense, but ultimately pleaded guilty to assault occasioning actual bodily harm and intentional strangulation. And as a result, he received an 18-month suspended prison sentence and a stern warning from the judge that it was his last chance before his behavior would lead to harsher consequences. 9. Matthew Riley. In May of 2023, a police officer spotted a man passed out in the driver's seat of his vehicle in Cranston, Rhode Island. He then shook the driver awake and let him know that he was choking in his sleep. The snoozing motorist was 41-year-old City Councilman Matthew Riley. He apologized to the cop, claiming that he had sleep apnea, and the officer responded by pointing out that the politician had a crack pipe in his hand. Riley initially denied any drug use, but a search of his vehicle turned up a bag of fentanyl-laced crack cocaine in the center console. And at that point, the councilman admitted that he just relapsed after 13 years of sobriety. He partially blamed his drug use on a really bad divorce and reassured the officer that he was getting help. But instead of going to work that day, he was booked on a misdemeanor drug possession charge. Following the arrest, several public officials urged Riley to step down from his position as the chairman of the Cranston Republican Party. He took the advice and resigned from the city council. But it was only the beginning of more problems to come. Several weeks after the drug arrest, Riley was charged with far more serious crimes, involving an alleged assault against a female. While the details of the case are being kept under tight wraps, authorities revealed that Riley met the victim online. According to the most recent updates, Riley had asked the court to be released on home confinement after spending several months behind bars without bail. But in an interview with local station WJAR, his ex-wife adamantly opposed the request. The case appears to be ongoing, so the consequences Riley received have yet to be seen. 8. Bradley House. In early 2022, A renowned winemaker from Ontario's Niagara region opened his door to a stranger in need and paid for it with his life. Paul Pender and his wife had just sat down for dinner at their cottage along Lake Erie when 31-year-old Bradley House appeared on their doorstep. His mouth was bleeding and he had no coat on, even though there was a blizzard outside. House seemed disoriented and claimed that he was injured from falling down a hill. Pender let the distressed stranger inside while his partner called for emergency medical help. Convinced that there was a twig stuck in his ear, House grabbed a kitchen knife and dug into his skull in an attempt to remove the imaginary object. And when Pender tried to intervene, House stabbed him and chased after him. A struggle ensued between the two men as House repeatedly plunged the knife into Pender's flesh. Pender's partner managed to wrestle the knife away from House, and bystanders restrained him until help arrived. Sadly, though, it was too late to save Pender's life, and the 54-year-old was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities charged House with murder, while the defense has argued that he isn't guilty due to mental illness. House claimed that he genuinely didn't remember stabbing Pender, while a forensic psychiatrist testified that he lacked the ability to understand his actions at the time of the attack. The defendant had been working on a home renovation near Pender's house when he fled the worksite on foot. He told the police that he'd blacked out, and when he finally became lucid again, he realized he was in trouble and assumed he'd stolen a car or committed some other crime. But in reality, things were far worse, and House was shocked to learn that he'd killed someone. As of late October 2023, the trial is ongoing. 7. Kobe Wethall. Throughout the month of December 2022, a Wisconsin man named Kobe Wethall was charged with driving while intoxicated a total of 4 times. 2 of his arrests came after he was found passed out in his vehicle at intersections. On the day of the first incident, police responded to calls about Wethall snoozing behind the wheel, with the doors locked and the car in drive. He was unresponsive when emergency personnel arrived, giving them no choice but to shatter a rear window. Wethall was arrested for operating while intoxicated, and he already had an OWI conviction on his record from the past. So he faced a more serious second offense charge. Officers at the scene observed that Wethall appeared to be intoxicated by something other than alcohol, but he was released to a responsible party after being booked and processed. 2 days later, a restaurant employee in Rock County called the police and reported that Wethall was acting strangely. The workers said that they were worried about him getting behind the wheel, and responding officers once again observed signs that Wethall was under the influence of something other than booze. So he was booked on another OWI charge and was released with a future court date. Around 2 weeks later, drivers called to report a vehicle in a ditch, and police once again found Wethall knocked out cold in the driver's seat. He caught his 3rd OWI charge in less than a month, and was hit with additional counts for operating while suspended and misdemeanor bail jumping. Despite his repeated offenses, though, he was released yet again. His 4th OWI arrest came on Christmas Day, when he was found unresponsive at a stop sign with his vehicle running. It's one thing to be caught once for something as dangerous as drunk driving, but being caught 4 times in just 1 month is a whole other level of stupidity. So one can only hope that he's straightened his life out since then. 6. Felicia Franklin. Former Georgia lawmaker Felicia Franklin found herself in a humiliating predicament in September 2023 when emergency responders allegedly found her passed out drunk on the sidewalk outside a sports bar in Clayton County. Police body cam footage showed Franklin in a state of severe distress as she screamed at paramedics. In the video, an emergency responder could be seen approaching Franklin, who was lying on her side, and pulling her up into a sitting position. She could be heard wailing loudly and repeatedly screaming, "They left me here," while strapped to a stretcher and being rolled toward an ambulance. And later on in the clip, Franklin could be heard yelling at emergency personnel to get out of her face and hurling other abusive and profane statements at the people who were tasked with helping her. Franklin lost her job over the incident, but she wasn't about to accept the decision without fighting back. The disgraced former lawmaker denied the allegations that she was drunk, and in a lawsuit against her former employer, she claimed that someone drugged her with GHB before she was found passed out on the pavement. But the lawsuit further alleges that Franklin was actually found awake, but she was crying and in a vulnerable position when first responders arrived. A police spokesperson said that there was no evidence to support Franklin's claim of being drugged with GHB, including no signs that anyone had tampered with her drinks. The representative further claimed that investigators had reviewed footage of Franklin entering the bar alone and ordering several drinks, including 3 cocktails containing Hennessy and Grand Marnier. She also had a glass of wine and took a sip of another customer's beer. Then, in a separate video, police show Franklin receipts proving that she had more drinks than she initially admitted to. And in response, she said that she didn't remember having 5 drinks. She also claimed that some of the drinks on the receipt were purchased for other bar patrons. Franklin is standing by her side of the story and has vowed to fight for her version of justice to be served. 5. Patrick Wilson. 44-year-old Keith Troop was going about his regular day at a Chevron gas station in College Park, Georgia in December 2015, when things quickly spiraled out of control. A stranger ambushed him and pumped 14 bullets into his arms, chest, and back, ultimately ending his life. And after a search of the scene, officers counted 22 shell casings. The suspect, 21-year-old Patrick Wilson, fled the scene. He managed to evade police for several days before he was arrested with an AK-47 in his possession. When police closed in on the home where Wilson was hiding out, he attempted to escape by jumping off a second-floor balcony. Luckily, though, he was quickly captured. Wilson admitted that he and Troop had gotten into a fight more than a week prior to the deadly encounter. He accused Troop of threatening him during the previous incident and claimed that he blacked out prior to the shooting and didn't remember committing the crime. However, during that same conversation, Wilson allegedly admitted to removing his hoodie during the altercation so that Troop knew exactly who was shooting at him. Prosecutors accused Wilson of lying in wait for at least 20 minutes before opening fire on the victim. He began shooting as Troop exited the convenience store along Georgia's Old National Highway. In the end, a jury convicted Wilson of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison plus 15 years with no chance of parole. 4. Connor Shearman. 24-year-old Connor Shearman supposedly didn't know where he was when he woke up in an unfamiliar house following an alcohol-induced blackout in 2006. As he walked through the residence, he realized that he was at his neighbor's house in Kirkland, Washington. He'd killed the entire family and destroyed the house. And he didn't even remember doing it. Included among the victims were 28-year-old Olga Milken, whose husband was serving in the military overseas at the time, and Olga's sister-in-law, 24-year-old Lyubov Botvina. Hours earlier, he'd consumed at least a liter of vodka, which means that his blood alcohol content was most likely 4 times the legal limit. After discovering what he'd done, Shearman took a shower in the home and then set it on fire, hoping to destroy evidence of what had really happened inside the residence. He then went home, took a nap, and was arrested shortly thereafter. An unsympathetic jury convicted Shearman on 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced him to death. But due to the ongoing controversy over whether to abolish the death penalty in Washington, it's possible, or perhaps even likely, that Shearman will end up serving a life sentence rather than being executed. 3. Ivon Serrano. Just days before the Thanksgiving holiday in 2019, 21-year-old Daniela Tabares Maya was found shot dead in the driveway of a home in Coral Springs, Florida. The homeowner, 51-year-old Ivon Serrano, dialed 911 at 6 a.m. and reported discovering Maya's body as she left to go to the gym. Serrano claimed that she didn't know the victim or any details about the shooting, but this was evidently a lie. According to police, Serrano eventually admitted to knowing Maya from the gym. She stands accused of shooting the victim as Maya dropped her off at home after a girls' night out drinking. Serrano reportedly admitted that she remembered going to the bar, but claimed that she blacked out from drinking too much and didn't remember how she got home. Later on, fellow members of the gym Serrano went to told the Herald News that Ivon didn't fit in. She was a military wife of many decades who joined the gym after her family's most recent move to South Florida. But she came across to certain gym-goers as abrasive and self-absorbed. Serrano's unlikable traits apparently became exacerbated when she hit the bottle, based on how that fateful night at the bar ended. In fact, Serrano's gym membership had been suspended by the time she took up the opportunity to go to the bar with fitness buffs she'd met at the facility. According to witnesses, the more Serrano drank, the more agitated and aggressive she became. The rest of the group was likely relieved when Maya offered to drive the drunk woman home. But they probably had no idea that the night would end with Maya being shot in the forehead at point-blank range. Following her arrest, Serrano allegedly admitted to police that she'd washed the shirt she wore home from the bar after realizing it had blood on it. She also supposedly confessed to deleting any incriminating surveillance footage that could have implicated her in Maya's murder. The exact details of the interactions that occurred in the minutes leading up to the shooting remain largely a mystery, leaving the victim's friends and loved ones without the answers they long for. Serrano faces charges of second-degree murder and tampering with or fabricating evidence. And in early 2022, she was kicked out of a rehab facility she was living in while awaiting trial. According to Coral Springs Talk, the facility banished Serrano for bullying her roommates. But for now, her case appears to be ongoing. 2. Paul Cox. 54-year-old Dr. Shanta Chevru and her husband, 58-year-old Dr. Lakshman Rao Chevru, were found stabbed to death in bed at their home in Westchester County, New York, on New Year's Day in 1989. Their throats had been cut, indicating that their attacker wanted to make sure that they were dead before leaving the scene. The accused culprit, Paul Cox, was arrested 4 years later when members of his Alcoholics Anonymous group reported his suspicious statements to the police. On the night of the killings, Cox had been drinking with some friends at a bar in New Rochelle. He was 21 years old at the time, and the group drank several pitchers of beer and cocktails, then hit the road. They got into an accident, at which point Cox proceeded to walk to his childhood home in Larchmont, where the murder victims were living at the time. He smashed a window, climbed inside the dwelling, and then murdered the victims. Cox left behind numerous fingerprints, but because he had no criminal record at the time, investigators were unable to match the prints to anyone in the national database. It was only when Cox began confiding in fellow AA members about having dreams and fragmented memories of the killings that the mystery was finally solved. Following his arrest in 1993, Cox insisted that he didn't remember entering the couple's home and murdering them in cold blood. He claimed that he experienced an alcohol-related blackout on the night in question. AA members, including his girlfriend, later testified that Cox said that he believed he mistook the victims for his parents. But prosecutors claimed that Cox's decision to return to the crime scene and attempt to clean it up reflected a conscious awareness that he'd done something wrong. Argued that Cox was temporarily insane and therefore not responsible for his actions. Defense attorney Andrew Rubin acknowledged that his client was responsible for the victims' deaths. However, he shifted the focus to Cox's history of learning disabilities, family issues, and childhood trauma, presenting them as mitigating factors influencing his actions. Rubin claimed that Cox's deadly behavior was triggered by a lethal combination of his parents' criticism and drinking too much alcohol. But the defendant's own mother, Mary Vandernoot Cox, testified that her son resisted every single effort she and her husband made to help him throughout his troubled teen years. She also conceded that the prosecutor's depiction of Paul and his behavior were fair. Cox was found guilty of a reduced manslaughter charge in 1994 and was sentenced to 16 to 50 years in prison. The jury found that he'd been affected by an extreme emotional disturbance and agreed with the defendant's claim that he acted in the midst of an alcoholic blackout. However, the finding was controversial for numerous reasons, including the fact that groups like AA felt they deserved the same legal protections as a religious meeting when it came to privacy. Cox appealed the verdict, and in 2001, his conviction was overturned, primarily on the basis that AA should be considered a religious group and therefore afforded the same protections as someone who confesses to a priest. By then, Cox had served 7 years in prison for the killings. This time, the prosecution appealed the ruling, and the U.S. Supreme Court decided that an AA meeting doesn't enjoy the same privileges as a religious group. State prison records show that he was released in 2021 at the age of 54.
And now for number 1. But if you want to hear even more stories, stay tuned for some extra content that you might have missed.
1. Tyler Hiok. 59-year-old volunteer librarian Elizabeth Salm was found brutally beaten at the Christian Science Reading Room in downtown Ottawa in May 2018. She died in the hospital the next day, and her attacker, 18-year-old Tyler Hiok, was charged with her murder 3 days after the attack. Hiok was reportedly cooperative with the police. He told law enforcement that he'd been blackout drunk and didn't remember the attack. The teen further claimed that he didn't know he'd killed anyone, and the officer interrogating him later claimed to overhear the young man wondering out loud what his own malfunction was. The same officer later testified that he didn't notice any sign of intoxication while speaking to the suspect. One of Hiok's longtime teachers, who saw him about an hour after the murder, also testified that he didn't seem intoxicated and was acting like his usual self. But at least one person who knew Hiok testified that they noticed changes in his appearance right after the murder, including his freshly shaven head. When Hiok was charged with murder 3 days after the brutal assault, he reportedly seemed sad. However, when the case went to trial, he pleaded not guilty to the crime. Hiok was found guilty as charged, which comes with a mandatory sentence of 25 years to life in Canada. 9. Lourdes Hernandez. During the early morning hours one day in 2020, New Mexico State Police Officer Gustavo Avina pulled a vehicle over for speeding at 73 miles per hour, 117.5 kilometers per hour, in a 55 mile per hour, 88.5 kilometer per hour zone. Behind the wheel was a 25-year-old off-duty Las Cruces officer, Lourdes Hernandez, who parked in the middle of a traffic lane for the traffic stop. She told the trooper that she had her service gun on her. According to a state police report, she seemed impaired. As she rummaged through her car for her insurance and registration, she told Avina that she never gets pulled over. When the officer mentioned how she had pulled over in the middle of the road, she said it again, that she never gets pulled over. Avina asked Hernandez if she had been drinking, mentioning that he smelled alcohol and that her eyes were red. Hernandez denied drinking any booze and began to tear up as she explained that she and her boyfriend had just gotten into a fight. She refused a breathalyzer, which comes with an aggravated DWI charge under New Mexico law, and also refused to take a field sobriety test. Authorities also charged Hernandez with speeding and negligent use of a deadly weapon. She was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the case. 8. Russell Brown. During a vacation to Scottsdale, Arizona in early 2023, Canadian Supreme Court Justice Russell Brown allegedly got drunk and began behaving strangely. He was accused of approaching a group of guests at a luxury resort and spa, and sitting with them uninvited and trying to follow guests to their rooms. According to the cringeworthy details of a police report, Brown bragged about the importance of his job position to the group of people he joined in the lounge. He also read some lines from a speech he delivered earlier that day. The report claimed that some female witnesses described Brown as creepy, and that he continued kissing their hands and flirting after they asked him to stop. They were the same women who later said that Brown tried going back to their rooms with them. An onlooker named Jonathan Crump reportedly punched the judge several times to try getting him to leave the women alone. He said he told Brown that he was clearly intoxicated and that he was making people uncomfortable. Brown allegedly pushed Crump, who responded by pushing him back and clocking him twice. By the time police arrived, Brown was in his room and didn't answer the door. Officers took a report from Crump and others who were willing to talk, and they concluded that Crump's decision to punch Brown appeared reasonable and necessary. And while no arrests were made, Crump complained to Canada's Supreme Court, and Brown was put on leave pending the outcome of an ongoing investigation. He initially avoided commenting to the media, but has denied Crump's allegations and claims that he was attacked in an unprovoked fashion. 7. Mary Kavanaugh. In early 2022, police in Livonia, Michigan pulled over a vehicle that was swerving all over the road and had 2 flat tires. The traffic stop was enacted after an officer heard the thumping sound of the vehicle's deflated wheels rotating on the pavement. The driver, Michigan Representative Mary Kavanaugh, clearly seemed impaired. According to a police report, she said to the officer, "I feel like I had some type of tire or something." He told the cop that she was coming from a political meeting, but was unable to tell him where it had occurred. Kavanaugh repeatedly rifled through the same stack of papers, which clearly did not contain the documents the officer had asked her for. When he asked her if she knew how her tires popped, she said no. The boozed-up lawmaker was charged with operating a vehicle while intoxicated. It was her second case, and she publicly admitted to it. She said that she struggles with addiction and apologized for her actions. Kavanaugh pleaded guilty to the charge and was sentenced to probation and ordered to pay fines. She still holds her position as a representative. 6. Casey Anderson. In 2022, officials in Montgomery County, Maryland, received an anonymous email accusing the county's planning board chairman, Casey Anderson, of having a full bar in his office. The complaint accused Anderson of drinking on the job, along with members of the Department of Parks and the Montgomery County Planning Department. In the words of the email, Anderson has over 32 bottles of hard liquor in his office, where he routinely creates mixed drinks and distributes them on a significant scale. The message also claimed that he had forced coworkers and colleagues to drink on several occasions. An investigation was launched. The whistleblower insisted on staying anonymous, but dropped the names of 10 employees who allegedly drank with Anderson, or at least had first-hand knowledge that it was going on. A confidential internal report obtained by 7 News revealed that at least 2 employees confessed to drinking with Anderson in his office, on an average of 2 times per month. Another employee admitted to participating in the festivities, but said that they didn't interpret it as being overly wrong because these extracurriculars typically happened outside normal work hours and on Fridays. But the county has a zero-tolerance policy toward alcohol, and Anderson's liquor stash was in direct violation of the rules. Anderson admitted to having the alcohol, but denied ever pressuring anyone to drink. He emptied out the cabinet and took full responsibility for his actions, admitting that he should have never brought alcohol into the workplace, even if it was only being consumed after work. 5. Jody Warner. Unlike some of the government officials you'll hear about in today's video, former Dallas Assistant Prosecutor Jody Warner wisely ordered an Uber when she had been drinking and needed to get home one night in 2017. But her smart decisions apparently ended there. During the ride, Warner allegedly ordered the driver, Sean Platt, to stop using GPS and to follow her instructions instead. He said that she stopped giving him directions at some point and an argument ensued, during which Warner began calling Platt names and implied that if he called the police, they would believe her story over his because of her job position. Realizing that she could be right, Platt took his phone out and began recording the attorney's obnoxious behavior. She pushed the limits to the point where he asked her to get out of the car. Warner refused, demanding that Platt either take her home or get the cops involved. The frustrated driver opted for the latter and waited patiently for the police to arrive while Warner continued to berate him, calling him a joke, an idiot, and other insulting names. She even threatened that the cops would F him up, told him to shut the F up, and accused him of committing a felony and kidnapping her by refusing to drive her home. Platt turned the footage over to the Dallas Morning News, and it quickly went viral. It wasn't long before Dallas County District Attorney Faith Johnson announced that Warner had been fired. During a press conference, Warner claimed that she felt uncomfortable when Platt took a different route to her house than the one she's accustomed to. She said she went into fight or flight mode and that not everything Platt accused her of was true. Warner apologized, but to some, it sounded like she was also continuing to make excuses for her abhorrent behavior. 4. Jed Fillingham. A senior executive for the U.S. Veterans Affairs Department named Jed Fillingham was in Dallas for a conference in 2010 when he was met with an unexpected tragedy. He and two colleagues went out drinking together and then got into a vehicle together and headed toward their next destination. During the drive, 38-year-old Amy Wheat fell out of the car and died. Police took Fillingham into custody on suspicion of intoxication manslaughter, but authorities declined to bring charges when his blood alcohol level tested at 0.03, well below the legal limit for driving in Texas. It is possible that Fillingham was drunk at the time of the accident. The test wasn't administered until 6 hours after the accident, and 12 hours after he first entered the bar, which gave him plenty of time to sober up. Records show that he and colleague Chad Barney charged over a dozen drinks to their credit cards that night, totaling 14 beers, 12 Jaeger bombs, and 2 servings of vodka. According to a police report, investigators ruled out foul play and concluded that Amy Wheat exited the vehicle on her own accord. Fillingham was found in violation of VA policy, however, and resigned from his position amid the controversy, but was rehired for a different role the following year. Wheat's mother, Annette Berry, was outraged at the lack of consequences against Brown, as well as the fact that he was back to making a 6-figure salary within months of her daughter's tragic death. 3. Teresa Gruber. At least 6 U.S. Social Security Administration employees implicated one of the agency's top officials for acting intoxicated on the job in 2022. The allegations came to light during an investigation stemming from a complaint about Deputy Commissioner Teresa Gruber, who oversees an estimated 9,000 employees and is in charge of a $1.2 billion budget. Witnesses described observing Gruber with slurred speech, walking out of meetings without explanation, slouching, and acting volatile. 3 senior staffers who served directly under her confirmed the claims to the Washington Post on condition of anonymity. By the time the story broke out in mid-2022, the number of complaints against Gruber only seemed to be growing, yet she remained on the job. In the meantime, employees claimed that her erratic behavior had also continued. The staff members who complained admitted that they hadn't seen Gruber drinking, but said that her behavior caused them to wonder if she was drunk. There was also speculation that the 53-year-old was acting strange due to poorly managed diabetes. Either way, it was affecting her ability to do her job, according to those who raised the alarm. An investigation concluded that Gruber had, in fact, displayed significant anomalies over the last year on the job. She was reassigned as a senior advisor to acting Social Security Commissioner Kilolo Kijakazi. 2. Gerald Johnson. During the fall of 2021, police were called to a home in Habersham County, Georgia, in response to a report about a domestic incident. They arrived to find the county's top judge, Chief Magistrate Gerald Johnson, in his yard with a gun in his hand. He was allegedly drunk and had broken his wife's car window, shot the gun several times, asked a deputy to turn off his body cam, and was also accused of pointing the weapon at responding officers. While law enforcement chose not to criminally charge Johnson, the sheriff reported the incident to the Judicial Qualifications Commission during a hearing in late 2022, after being suspended for a year pending the outcome of the investigation. According to the attorney, Johnson was shooting his gun and drinking in the privacy of his property. He had also completed a treatment program for alcohol abuse. In Johnson's words, "I used alcohol as an escape and it became a prison." He testified that he only remembered parts of the ordeal that put his career in jeopardy. The hearing concluded that the sheriff's deputies who responded to the scene on the day of the judge's drunken outburst showed preferential treatment by not arresting him. Additionally, the panel determined that Johnson had violated the Judicial Code of Conduct and recommended his removal from the bench. Instead of sticking around until he was terminated, Johnson resigned. In a statement, he wrote that he respectfully disagreed with the committee's findings, but he apologized for his behavior and acknowledged that the situation affected the public's perception of his ability to be a good judge. 1. Chicago woman tries to walk through drive-thru. A 27-year-old Chicago woman made headlines in 2012 when she walked up to a McDonald's drive-thru window in Greenfield, Wisconsin in the middle of the night. One can only imagine that she must have been at least somewhat intoxicated to try ordering in such an unconventional way. A long line of cars formed behind her as an employee told her that she can't use the drive-thru as a walk-through. The woman refused to go away, so a staff member called the police. When officers arrived, she reportedly told them that she was a level GS-14 government employee, which would put her one level below the top rank, and that she made over $100,000 per year. But law enforcement was no more impressed by the claim than the fast food employees. An officer tried escorting the woman away from the drive-thru, but she allegedly crossed her arms and yelled at him not to touch her. She started to storm off in another direction and was hit with a disorderly conduct charge. According to a police report, she smelled of booze, her speech was slurred, and her eyes were glassy and bloodshot. Her blood alcohol level tested out at a .197, more than twice the legal limit for driving. Perhaps the one takeaway in her favor is the fact that she didn't get behind the wheel. Thanks for watching. If you saw a well-known government official harassing a restaurant server or a valet parking attendant for no apparent valid reason, would you step in and stand up for the worker, or would you stay out of it? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye. Would you rather stay sober at a party filled with booze while all your friends have a good time getting drunk, or wake up with no recollection of the night before due to excessive drinking? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.